Okay. If you can hear me, please go ahead and drop a message in the chat. Hello, Mav.
Oh, hi, Amaka. I can hear the background. I can hear the dogs giving you greetings in the background.
You gave me soundtracks.
Anyways, let's see. We have three people currently watching. I'm guessing from YouTube. So, guys, drop a message in the chat, right? Let's be sure we have people listening in before I proceed to talk about the topic of today. All right. So, drop a message in the chat, and yeah,
So,
we'll,
guys,
we'll.
please go ahead and do that. Drop a message. Drop a message.
All right.
Mav, you're
So,
muted.
me, Amaka, right?
Hello, Mav. You're muted.
Uh, no, I'm not. I'm speaking. Can you hear me? Okay, guys, I want to be sure if you can hear me. It seems like it's coming from Amaka's end. If you can hear me, let me know in the chat. Yeah, Oluwasegun, hi, good afternoon. Um, Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. Okay. All right. Okay. So I think we have Lola, we have Temidayo, we have Christian, Phoebe, and you guys can hear me. So nice. I'm going to be sharing my screen, and we are going to walk through the database and storage services on AWS. All right. So yeah, just give me a minute. I will proceed to share my screen shortly. Let's say AWS. So yeah, and I hope you guys have been able to create your accounts already. If you're still having issues creating your AWS accounts, do let me know. Well, yeah, I mean, I expect that you have created your account already. So let's see. I have my second screen connected, so I can share properly. And just give me a minute. All right, present. Okay, so I am sharing my entire first screen. That is what I want to do. Share. All right. So guys, let me know if you can see my screen. I will share this material with you at the end of the class. If you're on Discord, this will be shared with you on Discord. Yeah, for now, I'm just going to pull this into a different screen so I can use it as a reference while we're walking through some of these services, okay? And yeah, so that is it. Let's see, what do I have here? All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and quickly log in. Just give me a minute. I would love to do that site here. I was actually logged in earlier, so I have to quickly log in again. By the way, you can let me know in the chats what you've been, doing, what you've been practicing as regards AWS. For those of you that already have your accounts, um, while I proceed to authenticate AWS. Let's see, AWS. All right, sorry for the delay. I have to remove my screen first because I need to open, I need to get in with my with my 2FA. All right, so just give me a second. And that's the thing about AWS. If you're not active, on the portal for a while, it locks you out, right? And I'm sure most of you must have noticed that already. Yeah, so that is exactly what happened to me right now. All right, so I'm back here. Let's share again. All right, good. So, guys, I'm sure you can see my screen. I have AWS opened up, and we're going to walk through some of these services. I would try as much as possible to, explain and talk about these services, right? And then I will show you a couple of things, even down to showing you how to connect, how we connect some of these services via code. But of course, you don't need to write code, right? You can simply set this up by clicking here and there. Okay, so um, first off, you guys we have been covering different topics, right? When it comes to AWS, you understand the concept of the cloud. You understand the fact that we are basically trying to use resources that are hosted by a third party, which is AWS, right, on the cloud. So we call it the cloud because we're basically renting this these services, right? We're renting these resources, right? Um, so which means we don't have to purchase any physical hardware. Okay. Yeah, so since you already understand that, when it comes to storage and database, I want us to have this scenario. So imagine we have an e-commerce website that needs to store customer data, right, which is the kind of data you can put in a database, right? And then we also want to analyze sales trends, um, while also storing images or videos. So let's assume we have an e-commerce website where we have to store images of the products as well as some videos to describe the product. So let's say we allow the users to to upload video contents as well. So I'm simply going to show you a very simple example. Let's just have a description of what we're talking about. So basically we have users, right? So I think I can use this stick figure. So we have the users. I hope you can see my screen clearly. So we have the customer, basically communicating, via their device. It can be, of course, a laptop, a desktop, whatever it is. So we have like the device, you know, and we're trying to communicate with this, online shop. So let's call this shop.com, right? Or let's say fashion.shop. That makes more sense. Okay, so we're trying to communicate to this fashion website. And of course, when these users create an account, using their device, their mobile or a computer, you're simply expected to have, something that looks like this. So this is our website. All right. So now you have an account, right? And you are simply going to maybe create a product. So let's say you have your own shop, right? Your own storefront inside this application. When you're creating a new item, you're going to enter some values. You're going to enter like the name of the product, the description, right? What else? The price. Okay. So and a bunch of other items, right? Now these items you're putting in when you try to create a new product. That is an action. This list of details, these are texts, right? Remember, you're also going to put an image, but I would explain, what we usually see here. So when you put in these details as a user or as a platform owner, you are simply going to save those records in a database, right? So for those of you that don't know what a database is, we're looking at things like, a place where you can store mostly, textual data, right? So we are basically going to store these records in here. And this can be, it can be Postgres, right? It can be Postgres, it can be MySQL. So most of you might have heard of MySQL. Let's use MySQL. So you're going to put in this set of data, right, into MySQL, okay? And then you also want to add the image. Now, what you do is you save it. You can save a link to that image, but you are going to upload that image, right? So how are you going to upload that image specifically? Let's just assume we have a service. And I'm calling this a service because, I'm just trying to assume it's separated or, it's different from the particular interface that actually performs this upload of text, right? So let's call this a file upload service, which is in your code base, right? You have a file upload service, and then through this guy, we are simply going to say, oh, we actually want to, upload files, right? So now we want to upload like the thumbnail, the picture that would go alongside, the products, or maybe a list of photos, right? It can be a list of photos, it can be a video. So on AWS, I can decide to use S3, which is a service that I would explain shortly. So this can be the file upload service that will then upload that particular item here. And when it's uploaded, the link to that item, right? The link to that item will then be, added into this record you're seeing here, right? So the link to that item will be added, into this record. I'm just going to leave this as a pointer, but this is not the best way to describe it. The idea is we have uploaded the file. The link to that file that we have uploaded will be saved under the image, the image link, right? The image string, right? We're going to save that link here. So whenever we fetch this particular product that was uploaded, it is then going to, come as a string, which is the image will come as a string. And using that string, we can fetch the record from here, so long we have the permission to do that. Now, this is very simple. And, this flow I'm giving to you, of course, implementing it would not be as easy as I've said it, right? But trust me, it's something, it's feasible. I think that's the best way to put it. It's very feasible, right? Very, 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 very feasible. So let's talk about the services themselves, right? I mentioned S3, but I'm going to take it one step at a time now, and I'm going to, talk about S3. I'll talk about Amazon EBS. I'll talk about Amazon EFS, right? And a bunch of other services as well. So the first one, which is Amazon S3. Now we're talking about storage, okay? So let's pull up a text file, okay? So we're talking about storage. I apologize because I really don't spend enough time to create slides for you. But yeah, I would try as much as possible to do that. So we have S3, which stands for Simple Storage Service. It's really cold here, so I don't know. Typing, my fingers are kind of frozen. So Amazon S3, and this is the first storage service we're going to be talking about. So S3 simply stands for Simple Storage Service, right? SSS, which is S3, right? Okay, so yeah, so S3 is an object storage service for storing and retrieving data. So what do we mean by object storage? You can basically refer to your PDF files, your image files, your videos, right? Your basically any file that you want to keep in that specific format, in that raw format. For example, a document file, right? .docx, right? Your Excel, your spreadsheet files, and the rest of them. When you want to upload that document somewhere the way it is, and of course retrieve it that same way, right? You're referring to basically you're now referring to that particular item as an object, right? Okay, so S3 can be used to store those kind of data, and of course, when it comes to talking about the key features, I'll take down some of these things so you can also see them on my screen. All right, so I'm going to say Amazon S3. Oh, I think I can simply copy that from here. All right, so Amazon S3 is an object storage service for storing and retrieving data. Okay, so when we talk about the key features of Amazon S3, we're looking at we're going to be mentioning scalability. It is scalable in the sense that while you upload your items, it's basically it's just growing, right? The size is growing, so it's not going to tell you that you have reached a limit where you can no longer put in items. Of course, we have configurations, right? But it's very scalable. Unlike when you purchase a disk storage and you basically purchase maybe like 10 gigabytes, right? If it gets to 10 gigabytes, it can't accept any other item. Okay, so S3 is fully managed by AWS, and it's scalable. It is durable, meaning when you put in items and you fetch those items, of course those items will stay there. They are persistent, and you expect to see them or get them when you need them. Okay. And high availability, which means, at any point in time, I can request for my data and I would get that. I'm not going to be seeing messages like, a server is down or S3 service is down, so it is highly available, so these are some of the key features of Amazon S3. And we can also talk about data encryption and access control. These are also some, primary features. So when it comes to access control, you have, granular, like you have an interface where you can basically configure, how your data is accessed, right? It can be on individual data. It can be on what we call buckets. So you basically create a bucket, right? And you put in your items. So just to describe this, this is a bucket, for example. So on S3, you basically create a bucket or a folder, depending on, the right term is buckets, right? But we can call that a folder here, for this context. And then you save your items inside this particular bucket. So your buckets can have a name, a unique name that you have created. We can call this solomonmarvel.com, AWS buckets. Now, of course, this is me trying to add a prefix to say that, this particular bucket is tied to my website, right? So my website project, okay? So if you're creating a new bucket for like an e-commerce project, you can of course tie the name as well to say fashion.shop AWS bucket, right? It has to be unique, okay? And yeah, so when it comes to data encryption, what we are saying here is that you can basically, your data is encrypted by default, but of course you can also work on additional encryption, right, based on your configuration, as I said earlier. So at the end of the day, you have the ability to configure, you have the ability to set up your access control, the permissions. You can say, even though I have a link, right? I exported the link, I saved the link in my DB. Does that mean anybody can simply access the items in this bucket from a different website, right? So imagine we saved the files, we saved some files in here. Now, what if the person copies the link of that particular file? Can they just open it randomly on the browser? Yes, it is possible, but you can also set a permission that says, even if someone have this particular link, the person should not be able to access it except they are on my website, which is fashion.shop. So you see what we're talking about when it comes to permission. We're able to set up that permission in such a way that the person trying to access the content of item, the items in my buckets, they have to be on my website, right? If you are into web development, then I believe you might have heard of cross-origin requests. I think it's course, that's cross origin request sharing. Oh, cross origin resource sharing. Oh, sorry about that. Cross origin resource sharing. That's course, right? So you should be able to, if you understand cross origin resource sharing, then I'm sure you get a better picture of what I'm explaining, right? But at the end of the day, you're simply setting a permission to say that even if someone has the link to this resource, if they are not on my website, they should not be able to access it, whether it's a video or a picture. All right. So I hope you get that. Now let's quickly check this out. Currently on my AWS dashboard, I'm simply going to search, but you can see we have that here already. Now, if you don't have it here, because it's probably not part of your recently visited items, you can just search for S3 and, of course, you can mark this as favorite if you use it all the time, right? So if I click on S3, it's going to take us into our S3 console, all right? So let's see what we have here. So we have the S3 dashboard. So if you look here, you see we have a lot of buckets, right? So on the first glance, you see we have buckets. I have 15 buckets in here. We have a lot of buckets, kids club codes buckets. We have MedBookly buckets. So yeah, so we can actually create more. I have a sample bucket that is public, right? In terms of the access, you see it is public, and of course you see we have a warning here, so you can basically click on that to see you have like details as to why this is not best practice, right? Or why this is not recommended. But of course, you have permission to set up your configuration the way you want it to. So now let's look at what we have here. So we're going to click on buckets, right, which is going to give us like this exact list. That's what we are seeing already. So if I click on create buckets, I should be able to create a new bucket, and I can call this bucket, let's say top universe, or I'll just say TU cohort 3.0, which is 3.0, and I would say S3 buckets, right? So this is the bucket we have created right now. This is currently in this AWS region, which is US East North Virginia. That's US East 1, okay? And I can choose to copy my settings or configuration from an existing bucket, right? But we're not going to do that. So object ownership, let's use this, which is the recommended. We're disabling ALC, right? Which is, so we're disabling ALC. Let's see. So now we have all objects in the bucket are owned by this account, and access to this bucket and its object is specified using only policies, right? So we can use only policies to set up, like, the access and the configuration. So we have a policy file that we can basically use for doing that, right? So this is basically about object ownership. Okay. So now by default you are blocking all public access, right? Since we're just, I'm trying to show you an example. We can enable that. We can enable public access so we can get to see what we upload, right? But that's not even necessary. The point is you are able to upload and retrieve items. That's the most important point. And I'll show you how we would, do that with code. I'll show you with an existing code that I have, right? So let me go ahead, acknowledge this. So please always try as much as possible to, follow the recommendations instead, right? For this example, I'm not going to do this. Okay, so let's see. All right. So bucket versioning, let's disable that. Tags. Yeah, so AWS tags are great, and I've explained this before. You use tags so that it will be easy for you to, search for resources that are related, right? So if we're building a project, let's say we're building a project and we'll call this Top Universe Cohort Dashboard, right, as a project. We can use that Top Universe TU Cohort Dashboard as a tag for everything related to the TU Cohort Dashboard, be it the front-end application deployed on AWS, maybe using a service like Elastic Beanstalk, or be it the backend APIs, on Lambda, serverless API, serverless functions. We can basically use tags, the same tags for all these services, so that at the end of the day, for all these resources, so that at the end of the day, we will be able to use a single tag to fetch all the items related to this project. All right. So yeah, learn to use tags. Okay. Yeah, so for this example, I think I can also use this as a tag, right? Just for this example, nothing serious here, and I can even add more tags. But for now, let's leave it that way. And I'm going to proceed to click on the create bucket action button here. So this is going to create that bucket for us. And of course, we can see that bucket if we search. So here we have that bucket, and objects can be public. So let's click on that bucket. So now we can upload an item into this bucket manually. Let's do that. I'm going to add a file. Of course, you can add a folder. Let's add a picture. So I'm going to move down to like the AI generated picture. Let's click on this. This picture is kind of weird, but it's okay. So let's upload. All right. So I just clicked on upload, and yeah, we don't need to. We can add more items, right? We can just drag and drop as well. So let's click on upload. So as you can see, our item is currently being uploaded. Now this is manual upload. You can also perform, programmatic upload, from your code, right? So we have this item right now, as you can see right here. Let's go back to our buckets again. So now you see we have these buckets based on our filter. Click on this, and now you see we have this item, right? So if I click on this item, you can see the details of this item. You can see the S3 URI, you can see the object URL. So basically, this is going to, yeah, so this is telling us that, okay, access denied, we have not configured any permission yet. But let's go back into, all right, okay. So yeah, so you have your object URL first of all. But remember, this is disabled. You need to, make this visible. You need to make it publicly available so that when you click on it, you will be able to see it. If you look through The dashboard here, you're seeing, the metadata, object log, tags, you're seeing things like, let's see, the properties, right? So yeah, and a bunch of other things. Now, if you want to, go into like setting the actions, of course, you can choose to download this, you can delete, you can move, and yeah, so there's a bunch of things you can do, right? You can go under permissions as well to set if you want this to be public or private. I'm going to come back to permissions shortly because I want to explain a couple of things to you. But just to show you an example of uploading items, programmatically, I have my terminal opened up right now, and I'm going to navigate to projects. So let's see, open source. Okay. I have I have this let's see, what's the name of that project. Okay, so I have this project. I think I have to open GitHub first. Let's see. GitHub. I was hoping I had that locally, but I doubt. Yeah, that should be on that desktop. Okay, so let's see, brain. Um, Source code. Okay, so I would have to get that from GitHub. Let me search for LMS, LMS dashboard. Okay. All right, so this is it. And I think this is public, so you can, of course, download this code base as well. It's a backend LMS I just developed for. I think I can clone this. All right, so let's do a git clone. LMS dashboard. Okay, good. So now we have this LMS dashboard, and if you take a look at this, I'm going to open the uploads. So let's go to services, uploads, and S3. So what you're seeing right here is a simple, code base written in JavaScript, right? So you don't need to know how to code. You don't need to, write this. These are, going to be carried out by developers, right? But this is an example, of a code base that is meant to upload, your files, right? It's meant to upload your files into yeah, it's meant to upload your files into AWS. And I would have loved to show you an example. Hopefully, if we have enough time at the end of the session, I will quickly show you by uploading and retrieving a file from S3 using this code base. All right. So yeah. Okay. So back to this. So this is what I'm trying to say, right? Now there are several settings you need to set up for your S3 buckets, right? Let's go back to the buckets level here. So if I click on permission, now, if you notice one thing, I am under the bucket, not under the file, right? So it says objects can be public. Now we can basically choose to, edit this, right? To even like, extend the bucket policy. This is the policy file we were talking about earlier, right? And it's currently loading. Okay, so you can add, the policy statements. We can add a new statement. We can basically say, okay, we want this to be publicly available, by setting up this policy file here. We're not going to do that here because I want to explain this better to you during the workshops, right? And there are so many examples you can basically copy from. This is basically a JSON object, for your policy file. It's basically a JSON object that you can configure to set access, right? To set how you want people to access this particular bucket. Okay, let's go back to permission once again, and let's click on the access here. So now you see it says the objects can be public. We can click on edit, right? To basically, change this property, right? If you remember, I said this while I was creating it. We can configure this even after we've created the bucket. Okay, so let's go back one step again. All right, so let's click on this. So now this is basically a way to set individual block policy, right? If you enable if you disable the public option here, you can then go in here to basically set what you want, right? Or you can just choose to block all and only give permission to your code base. Most times you are not going to be uploading manually. You're going to be uploading via your code base, right? So you can say with the right credential, this particular account with this particular user or this particular secret key and yeah, this AWS credentials should be able to access these files. All right. So that is something you can do. Okay, so that is basically what I want to show you. This is S3. We have a bunch of other services. So let's quickly let's talk about the use cases. So I gave an existing use case from the diagram, but I'll give another scenario right now. So imagine you're a media company and you basically want to store and serve video content to millions of viewers, right? And you want to ensure that you have low latency and high availability. Now, S3 is a perfect tool or a perfect service you can use for storing this, for uploading this video content, storing and also sharing those video content to your audience. Okay. So I always love to give these scenarios because it's a better way for you to understand, the use case of this tool. Now, the next thing we have here is Amazon EBS, right? I'm going to share this right now to notes. All right, so we have Amazon EBS, which is still under the storage option, right? Now, Amazon EBS basically provides a block level storage volume, primarily for EC2 instances. Yeah, so let's search for EBS here, and you will see. Okay, I think I can just go through EC2. Let's jump into EC2 first. All right. So basically, when we say block level storage, we are referring to like your HDD, right, or your SSD. Okay. And I'm sure some of most of you should know this already. Okay. We are referring to volume. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on volumes. The network is a bit bad, but you can basically see that here, right? Can you see elastic block store? Okay. So if you drop this down, then you see you have volumes. So if you click on volumes, which is similar to this, it's going to open uh, our EBS store. So we can basically create a volume and then attach that volume to an EC2 instance, right? An instance that you've created already. So let's say we are currently running our application inside EC2, and we decide to say, okay, we want to store files inside our application, which is not recommended, but a bunch of people do that, right? If you're running monolith applications like in PHP, you might have seen where they create they create this folder, and inside that folder, they call it uploads, right? So if you're running your application this way, you can use EBS to create volumes. As you can see, I have some volumes here, 30 gig, 20 gig, 8 gig, for just some, basic services. But you can create a volume, 100 gig, 200 gigabytes, and more. You can create these volumes to basically accommodate the files that will be contained inside your application. If you are storing files in your application server, as I said earlier, I will not recommend that, but a bunch of people do it. Okay, for some reasons, maybe for some business reasons, I don't know. That is basically where you use EBS, and we can create a new volume by simply clicking on create new volume. You can select the kind of volume. Always remember pricing, right? Understand the cost. First of all, understand what you're trying to do, right? What do I need? What can serve my purpose? Okay, so you proceed to select the option you want. You set the size, so you see minimum of 1 gig and maximum of I think this is 16,000 gigabytes. Okay, so you can of course set your this is basically the IOPS, right, which is input output per second, talking about speed, right? So yeah, you can basically set up this configuration, select your availability zone, and of course, I'm sure most of us already understand, the reasons behind selecting the right region and availability zone. It most times depends on where your customers are situated, right? So if you're trying to offer a service for maybe you majorly have your customers in Nigeria, of course you should be looking at places like EU, right? Instead of selecting US East 1, you should be looking at, EU Central, EU West. I usually go with Frankfurt, which is EU Central 1, right? If most of the customers are situated in Nigeria, and if I have like a lot of traffic, right? A website that needs um, a website that should accommodate a very large capacity, right, in terms of traffic. So yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're setting up. Okay, so when you're done with these options, just click on create volume, and you have your volume created. Now remember that after creating this volume, you can then proceed to append this volume to a specific EC2 instance. Okay, we'll do that in the workshop. We're not doing that here because I have a lot of EC2 instances. I don't want to even open that at all, because of the IPs. All right. So let's leave this for now, and yeah, let's talk about the use case here. So I have a simple scenario, right? And this is my scenario for an EC2 for the EBS. So you have a financial institution, and they want to use EBS for their transactional database. Now, remember, I told you something. I said it depends on the business case, right? Most of these institutions probably don't want to have their data sitting on some third-party providers. They want to basically, have it inside the same space as their application. They don't want to separate it, maybe because they are using some sort of, or maybe there are some sort of compliance issues. I don't know. I currently work in a place where compliance is very important, right? You have to be very sure. The fact you can do this on the cloud does not mean you should do it on the cloud, right? You have to understand compliance first. Okay, so now this financial institution decides to use EBS for transactional, for its transactional database to ensure low latency. So this is wrong. Let me take this off. So they're trying to use EBS, to store. I would say, okay. I think I get what I have here. So basically, they are hosting their database inside EC2, and they want to use EBS as a way to ensure that they have enough capacity, right? So you create an EC2 instance, you install your MySQL or Postgres inside EC2, and then because of the amount of data going in, you just want to make sure you have enough storage, right? Which is why they are using EBS, right, for this scenario. Okay, so I hope you get that. But of course, you can also use it as a means to simply extend the storage you have so that you can store files on your servers as well. All right, so that is it. And the next one I have here is basically Amazon EFS, right, which stands for Elastic File System. Okay. All right, so Amazon EFS is a scalable file storage service, and I'm going to show you. So let's EFS. You see we have managed file storage for EC2. So let me click on this. All right, so apologies for the speed of my network. Well, yeah. So basically, you have EFS, and one of the major benefits of using EFS is that, of course, it is scalable. It's basically going to provide you. It's going to provide you, this simple and a scalable option, for your workloads, right, within your EC2 instances as well. So it's of course similar to the block store, but the major thing you should understand here is if you create a file system and you attach this file system, so it is built to scale, right? So if you attach this file system, when we say something is elastic, I think that's the main keyword I want you to understand here. It means it is actually built to scale. You can store. If you look at what we did earlier, we tried to create. We say we can set 100 gig, 50 gig, 30 gig. Now, in this scenario, you can basically create something that is scalable, right? So it can automatically scale and accommodate, petabytes of data. So let's see what we have here. It says it is designed to provide massively parallel shared access to thousands of EC2 instances, enabling your application to achieve high levels of aggregate throughputs, right? Which means you can actually have like multiple AWS EC2 instances running, and then you can use an EFS system to basically, store files across multiple EC2 instances, right? And at the same time, it is built to scale on demand, right, into petabytes without disrupting applications, right? Growing and shrinking automatically as you add or remove files. Okay, eliminating the need to provision or manage capacity. So you don't have to provision a capacity manually. It's not necessary for this particular service. It can scale, right? And this makes a lot of sense if you have a use case like that. All right. So for the use case I have here, this is the use case we have as a scenario. The content management system, that relies on EFS to store and share files across multiple web servers, ensuring consistent content. So they have multiple web servers, unlike EBS where you have to connect that to an EC2 instance. Right now, you have like multiple instances using the same, shared, file storage service, right? So if a particular instance is uploading a file, the other instances should be able to access that file as well, right? So before you implement something like this, you should be looking at maybe you're building a system that is, meant to scale, to a very large capacity, like to a very large audience. Okay, we're talking about, hundreds of gigabytes, right, in terms of storage, right? If not, thousands of gigabytes. Okay, so I hope you understand what I have explained. By the way, if you have questions, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, okay? So let's move on to the next item we have here. The next item would be our AWS storage gateway. So we have AWS storage gateway. I can see the network is also affecting a lot of people here. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do right now. Let's take this off. Hold on, please. Okay, so AWS storage gateway. Yeah, so basically, if you have questions, drop your questions in the chat. I am currently looking at the chats. I have to pull up my screen. So I can also see that we have shared the attendance. So please go ahead and fill that. Okay, so AWS Storage Gateway is basically an hybrid solution. It's an hybrid solution. When we say hybrid, we are talking about something you can basically merge with your on-site or on-premise applications, right? So if you have like an on-premise, so when I say on-premise, you deploy your services on site, right? Physically in a physical location that you have access to, right? So you have deployed that application, but then you need additional capacity when it comes to storing data, right? So you can basically use a storage gateway. It excels in that scenario, and yeah. So I have an example. So you can basically see it here. We have see how it works, right? You see your on-premise services, right? Your applications, whatever you have on-premise, and then storage gateway is kind of like giving you that bridge to connect with, S3, probably using so I think yeah, with X3 with probably some extra services, right? So you see, we also have EBS. So it's basically, giving you that access to connect what you have on site, right, with what you have in the cloud. Okay, for the purpose of storage. All right, primarily for the purpose of storing your data. Okay, so this provides on-premise applications with access to virtually unlimited cloud storage, right? So that is basically what AWS storage gateway is used for. All right. This is not something I have personally used, but of course you must understand that you cannot use all the services on AWS. It's not realistic, for just a single person. We have tons of services. We have tons of services, right? And it will be very difficult for you to be everywhere. The major thing you must understand is being able to access these pages, understand what this is used for at that point in time. Conduct your research. As someone working in the cloud, you should be able to do a lot of search, right? You should be able to do a lot of research and findings, right, from the right sources. Okay, so you can see the customers also using these services right here. All right, so feel free to visit this page, aws.amazon.com/storage gateway. I will drop the link in the chat. yeah, you can visit that page at the end of this session to read more. Okay. All right. So let's go back. Um, yeah, let's take this off. Let's see. Okay, so let's actually proceed, but I think I should also give my scenario because I do have a scenario here. So basically, this is the storage. The storage gateway is an hybrid cloud storage service, right? I mentioned that already. And what are the types of storage gateway that we have? So you have the file storage gateway, volume storage gateway, and the tape gateway that falls under the AWS storage gateway. And when it comes to the scenario, let's look at it this way. So imagine um, imagine you have a manufacturing company that wants to integrate with AWS storage gateway to back up its on-premise data, right, to the cloud. And yeah, by doing this, they are basically trying to provide disaster recovery capability. So if something happens to their data on-premise, they have a backup in the cloud. This is the major purpose, right, of using the storage gateway. So it's basically meant for those people that have physical infrastructures in terms of maybe like a physical data center for their services, and they're just using this for like a backup. Okay, all right. So that is it. I'm going to move right now to the database services that you can find on AWS. All right, and if you have any questions, go ahead and drop it in the chat. So someone dropped a message. Temidayo is saying, when using the volume gateway under the cache storage disk, can you elaborate more on the upload buffer disk and how the storage gateway uploads data from it? Okay, and Temidayo is also asking again, I read that the upload buffer disk works like, yeah, let's show that question so that everybody can see it. All right, so that is the question from Temida. I said, when using the volume gateway under the cache disk. Okay, so first off, Temidayo, I'm just going to clarify on this. So I just said the storage gateway is primarily used when you're trying to, connect your physical, you're trying to upload what you have physically, right, which is in your data center, your on-premise, infrastructure to the cloud, right? So based on your question right now, you're asking, when you're using the volume gateway under the cache storage disk, so what do you mean by cache storage disk? I think that is where we should start from. I think you should understand the meaning of some of these things before you dive into talking about them. Okay. So what do you mean by the cache storage disk? Because now you're asking that I should elaborate on the upload buffer disk and how the storage gateway uploads data from it. But you mentioned cache storage disk. So maybe you should elaborate on your question in the chat. So I read that the upload buffer disk works like a snapshot. Yeah, so whenever you hear the term upload buffer or like a buffer disk, we're basically referring to something that would act as, the kind of like the middleman to basically perform the upload, right? So it's picking the item from what you have on site and it's performing the upload to the destination, right? After which, of course, you expect it is, temporal, right? The data in there is temporal while it's performing that upload. Okay. So a snapshot is basically saying that, it back up like a set of data, and, basically, transferring that file to whether S3, based on what I showed you in the diagram, right? So probably uploading that particular data to S3. All right. And you are saying, I read that the upload buffer disk works like the snapshot you explained on one of the storage classes. Okay, on one of the storage classes. So I think you should make your question clear, all right? So yeah, make your question clear and I'll probably attend to that, okay? Okay, so, and I hope you understand the meaning of the term snapshot here, right? I hope you understand the meaning. When we say something is a snapshot, it's kind of like saying it's a backup of, your resource, right? You already have some items and you're basically creating a snapshot, like a complete backup of what you have, which of course you can then choose to, save in S3 or any other, storage, any other storage service, right? Um, and of course, you can choose to save that there, for a certain period of time or for a very long time, or just for the purpose of, performing some kind of action, right? So try to understand the meaning of these terms. then maybe you can rephrase your question. All right, so on to the next, the database services. And yeah, so let's talk about database services on AWS. The first one we're going to be starting off with would be RDS, right? So if you have checked out the Amazon database services, then definitely you should have seen RDS, right? So if I search for RDS, we're going to see that right here. So this is Managed Relational Database Services offering from AWS. Now, RDS is basically, just as it sounds, just like the name, relational database services, which means we're mostly, talking about relational databases. Um, we have an offering for document database, like something that is compatible with MongoDB. We have the AWS document DB. We'll talk about that very soon. So as regards RDS, you can basically create MySQL or Postgres SQL databases, using RDS. So let me click on create databases. By the way, you can see that you have up to 40 instances that you can create here, right? And yeah, each of those instances you can basically specify, your configurations to say this is how many gigabytes I want, alongside my database, right? In terms of the storage, okay? And you can choose to restore a database from S3, right? Let's just click on create database from here. So when we're about to create a database, it's going to give us options, such as either creating a standard, following the standard create option, or the easy create, right? Let's go with standard create. Here you see we have different engines, right? These are the engine options under RDS. So we can basically create with the Postgres SQL engine, the MySQL engine, and the Aurora. Aurora is an offering from AWS, but it has MySQL and PostgreSQL compatibility, which means you can basically create an Aurora DB with the Postgres engine, and of course connect to that. Now, the benefit of using Aurora is that the benefit of using Aurora is that you see we have basically up to 128 terabyte of auto scaling SSD storage, right? Um, it can also You can also have up to 5 times the throughput of MySQL of your regular MySQL Community Edition for those of you using MySQL on production. So you can see you have 5 times the throughput, which means it performs better. Okay, and yeah, and of course, when it comes to when it comes to the supported database engines, I think it's ideal that you understand, what I mean here. If you have used any of these databases before, it means this is not something new to you, right? So whether it's MySQL or Postgres or Oracle, or even using Microsoft SQL Server, for those of you that probably came from .NET background, right? You can also create a Microsoft SQL Server compatible engine, compatible database here on RDS. Okay, these are all relational databases. All right, these are all relational databases. And yeah, so let's assume you want to create like a Postgres database, for example. I can select this. Let's see. Okay, so I can basically select the engine version, right? For my database, we have a lot of versions here. The recent one is, the version 15, right? But I think the most standard one I've seen people use is version 14. So this is probably still relatively new. I'm not very sure of that, but even myself, I use version 14 on my servers. Okay, so let's just go with version 15 there. For our template, we can say this is going to be production ready. So you are asking AWS to give you a configuration that would give you high availability, something that should be fast, and something that should have a consistent performance. Okay, or you can say we are just using this for a test environment. So it basically gives you an instance that is intended for development outside of the production environment. Or you can just go with the free tier, right? You have a free tier. Basically, you're just testing things out. You're just trying things out, and you want to start from the free tier before you move into either production or maybe tests, right? Yeah. So let's go with the free tier. So we can set our database name, right? So let's set our database name. I'm going to simply call this, let's see, TU cohorts 3.0 database, right? So I'll just say Postgres database. Let's see. Okay, let's just say PDB, right? So Postgres DB. Okay, trying to ensure that I use things that I can remember so that I delete this at the end of the day. All right. So yeah, so this is for the credential setting. So basically, you have the master username, which is Postgres, and of course, you can set your password, or basically use auto-generated password. Let's leave this as Postgres, of course. Postgres. So auto-generated password. Okay, so this will basically auto-generate the password, and of course, it will be shared with you. You can choose to create your own password, but of course, this will give you something even stronger, right? It will generate a stronger password for you. So let's go with that. And here we can basically select the instance. Now, remember, we're using a free tier plan. So of course, we have two vCPUs, 1 GB of RAM, and our network is about 2000 megabytes per second. So this megabits per second, this is fine, right? And we are currently using the general purpose SSD, and this is the allocated storage 20 GB. Now, this is on our free um, tier. Let's just verify that we're still on the free tier plan. Okay. All right. So, yeah, so at this point, you can basically scale, the size. So you see you have the maximum value of 6,000 GIB, and the minimum is 20 GIB. So yeah, we can proceed with that. What else do we need to set here? So by default, it is using your default VPC. Remember, I think you have a class where we discussed VPC, which is your virtual private cloud, which is a way to, it's simply a way um, to isolate, your service from the general cloud, right? So you have like a VPC. Let's see if I have a yeah, you have a VPC, and then you can put in your items in that VPC, right? And of course, your VPC, should be in a particular availability zone, right? And that availability zone should then be in. Do I have an availability zone? Let's see, zone. Okay, all right. So you have an availability zone, for example, and yeah, okay. So let's just say you have like your VPC, and then you have a region, right? You have a region. So a region. Let's see. I can use this as an AWS region, for example. Let's start with this. So you have an AWS region, and then you configure your VPC inside, that particular region. So this can be like, US East 1, right? I don't want to go into so many details, but you get the point. You have your region, you are inside that particular region, and then you can create a VPC. And inside your VPC, you can decide to, set up your databases. So if I search for RDS, I basically have one database here. So I can just call this our database name, which is what we have created right now. This is the name. So we have, come on, we have this item, right here inside that VPC, right? And of course, you can have multiple items, inside the same VPC. You can have like your, EC2. Then you can set your, your rules. You can proceed to set rules. So if I have like an EC2, right in here, I can say our EC2 can communicate with this database, right? Because they are both in the same VPC. So I have to set up like all the necessary, configurations needed, right, to ensure that this can communicate with this, right inside our VPC. But something else should not be able to communicate with this. And in order to do that, you have to then, start setting up, subnets, right? So please make sure don't make the mistake of ignoring those workshops. You're going to learn a lot from those workshops, right? Because you set up your subnets, you set up your security groups, to say that I have like the public subnet, I have a private subnet. You're basically setting up access, right? You're basically setting up access, and you're trying to ensure that what goes into these specific services is what you want, is what you want, right? You have set up that permission so that maybe you don't want this particular EC2 database, EC2 instance, and the RDS database to communicate to the public, internet. If you want it to communicate to the internet, then of course you have to then include your internet gateway, right? So you have to include your gateway, which is your internet gateway. We're going to cover, most of these things, during our workshops. So please make sure you are in the workshop. So this is our internet gateway. So make sure you get into the workshop, right? It will be shared with you. We're currently working on that. And, during the workshop, we're going to explain how you can basically set up, internet gateways, NAT gateways, communicate with, these services within your subnet. And of course, even use the database, like, test that particular database. If we create this, for example, this is currently using our default it's currently using our default configuration. So as you can see, you see the pricing as well, the expectation, the DB instance, the storage. So we're going to be spending $15 for this monthly, right? So if we create this, we can then proceed to, connect to this database, right? And there's so many tools you can use to connect to your databases. But of course, you guys are not developers per se. You're not the one using this. You're probably creating this for the developers, right? So they have their tools for doing that. But if you want to connect with this, you can use a tool like a Beekeeper Studio or maybe dbeaver. Or we have a lot of tools out there, right? We have a lot of database clients. You can even connect to this directly from your terminal. But you know, this is this is what I use most of the time because it's fast, right? So yeah, so you can basically connect to this. Let's close this. All right. So yeah, so as you can see, we have this. It's still creating. We're still creating this. So at the end of the day, after creating this, you can proceed to connect. Right. You can always check the status. This is still creating. So we're not going to wait for it. Okay. Let's proceed. Let's just proceed to the next. Okay, so I can see we have more messages. So the cache storage disk is where data is stored, waiting to be uploaded to Amazon S3 from what I understand. So, I mean, okay, which is exactly what I just said as well. But I mean, you talking about gateway, what I'm asking is, your question. Your question, you see your question. From your question, you said how the storage gateway uploads data from it, right? And you're saying when using volume gateways under the cache storage disk, can you elaborate more on the upload buffer disk? All right. So of course, what you are just describing right now is, you have like, and I said it's temporal, right? So it's basically going to, upload those data, right? And you describe you mentioned snapshot. So if we're talking about snapshot is basically more like a backup to what you have to your data, right? That is packaged and is being transferred, from one particular point to another, or you can even choose to save those snapshots on S3. Okay, so snapshots work the same way, but it's more relatable than the upload buffer disk. Okay, so maybe you can read up on some of those, details. I shared the link. Please click on that link and do more, read up from that particular page. Maybe that would answer your question, or you can, yeah, maybe I believe that should answer your question. Okay, right. So let us move on to the next. It's already 1:03, and I have a meeting coming up shortly. So, all right. So for the benefits of RODS. So let's just look at the scenario again here. So this is a very simple scenario. A startup chooses Amazon RODS to host its e-commerce database, allowing the team to focus on app development while AWS manages the database, right? So it's a managed service. You don't have to, install your own Postgres instance on EC2. You don't have to manage your own instance of EC2. It is deployed on AWS, and all you have to do is connect to it, right? So you can see your production data. And of course, you can even create a replica that can be used for development, right? Yeah. So, okay. So I just give an example focusing on the Postgres engine, but of course, you can use SQL Server as your engine. You can use MySQL as your engine. You can use Oracle as your engine. All right. So now DynamoDB. Okay. So basically, that is the next one we're going to be looking at. DynamoDB. So DynamoDB is a NoSQL database service, right? So you can basically have your data, the way you have your key value pairs, right? So it's highly scalable. It has low latency access, and as a matter of fact, I have used this before and I loved it. I love the fact that it actually structures your data in such a way that uh, you can basically set up various access patterns that makes a lot of sense, right? You can set up what we call the indexes, right? So whether it's the primary indexes, as you can see, this particular database has been, set up, and yeah, I'll be deleting it afterwards. So we have generated your database master password, and it will be displayed in your connection detail, blah blah blah. Okay, so let me go ahead to show you. I think I can select this. Let's go to the action. So let's delete this so that I don't forget. Please, anything you are not using, always remember to delete it before you dash. So it says cannot create. Did I click on? I don't need any snapshots. Do I? No. Okay. You can't create a snapshot because you don't even have any data in that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're deleting this currently. So let's quickly search for DynamoDB. DynamoDB. Most people would prefer to use DynamoDB instead of DocumentDB. DocumentDB on AWS is also NoSQL, a NoSQL database service, and it's even MongoDB compatible, right? So you can basically use MongoDB practices in your code base, right? As well as yeah, I mean you can basically use Mongoose, PyMongo, all those libraries while connecting to DocumentDB. But DynamoDB is quite different, in the sense that what you do is you create a table, but then even the table you're creating, it can manage a lot of records. The records does not really have to, be relational like your regular relational database tables, right? So yeah, so you can basically create a table. I don't have any table here, and I'm surprised. So, but yeah, let's just go ahead. I can create a table, and I can call this table, TU cohort 30 data, right? So I'll just do that. So I can enter a partition key, and the partition key is basically the table's primary key, right? So it gives you like this hash value that is used to retrieve information from the table, and of course allocate data, across the host of, across the general host, right, for scalability and availability. Okay, so that's exactly what we have here. So we can specify the partition key. It can be email, it can be ID. It has to be something that you're including in your table, right? So it's a string, and for now that's what we selected. So we can basically use email as a partition key, and then a sort key. Now this is optional, right? So but it's kind of like having a second attachment to your primary key. So this is definitely going to give you I would say an improved way to even search, right? So the sort key allows you to sort or search among all items sharing the same partition key, right? So you have like your partition key, which can basically be if you're using email, it means you have a particular user creating multiple records where their email has to be reflected multiple times. So it depends on what you are trying. It depends on how you're trying to structure this this thing. So we can basically have like maybe ID for partition, and then we can choose to use an email for the sort key, right? Or we can even use like maybe some kind of employee ID, right? So it depends on what you're building as well. But by the time we have the workshop to talk about DynamoDB, we'll build something, and you'll get to see how you use the partition key, and of course the sort key. Let's just go with the partition key so that we can have our table provision for us. So I'm simply going to click on create table, and this will create our DynamoDB table. Now, what we've done here can also be done from the CLI. It can be done from, if you're using the SDK, maybe like, let's say you have, so let's say you're using Boto3, which is the Python library. You can basically provision and work with your DynamoDB tables as well. Okay. Yeah. So this is currently being provisioned. Oh, okay, that was fast. So the table was created. So now we have the table right here. So if I click on that, so you see we have that, we have the table. So if I click on this right now, which is already selected, you see we don't really have anything in here. So ideally, you can actually explore what you have here by clicking on explore table items, right? When I click on this, of course, you will see we don't really have any record. in here, right? So we have two major pattern when we are trying to fetch items. We can use scan or query, right? We don't really have any item in here, so of course items returns 0, right? And you can choose to create an item. We can create an item, from here. So if I click on create item, we can basically create an item from here. So you see we have an empty value, but we can then put in some details in here, or we can even use a JSON view. Right now, this is a form view, right? So we can use a JSON view where we can basically have even more items added in here before it's been created. Okay, so yeah, and I am thinking right now if I have source code, let's see, source code, okay, okay. So I have something here. So if I open this project, you see, yeah, so you see I have a simple project here. This is using DynamoDB, to create data, right? You see we're creating some data. So we are deleting data with this code base. It's looking a bit much, right? Of course, we're fetching data with this. We are listing data with this, and we're also updating data with this. Now, there is an alternative, right? Instead of using the AWS SDK and the commands, basically the functions for this, we can choose to use Dynamos, right? Which is just like you have Mongoose, right? So we have Dynamos. We can search for that. All right, let's just do Dynamos. And funny enough, I think I have a project where I use Dynamos. So let's see. I'm trying to think of projects. So I have this project website API. Let me be very sure if that is it. Database. So I have CRUD example. Oh yeah. So as you can see, this is using Dynamos, right? And you see my configuration here pointing on this region. So this is the schema, just like the way you use DynamoDB. For those of you that know DynamoDB, so we can basically create a document. We can read the document with this. We can update the document. We can delete a document. So you see, it's more I would say it's kind of better, right, in terms of the structure of your code, right? So Dynamos actually gives you a better, interface or a better way to communicate with DynamoDB, right? So this is more like a CRUD example, for performing all those operations that I mentioned earlier. So you can check it out if you want to explore DynamoDB and use DynamoDB. So this is Dynamos. So visit dynamosjs.com, right? And I can drop this in the chat as well. So let me do that right away. All right, so we have taken too much time already. So let me see. Okay, Godfrey is saying, what type of database, say MongoDB, Postgres, is okay that is compatible with DynamoDB during development? So DynamoDB is different, right? It's a DB on its own. It's not Postgres, it's not MongoDB, it's not. It's of course it's NoSQL, right? But those other ones you mentioned are not compatible. It's its own thing, right? And it actually has it has its own advantage, right? So it's its own thing from AWS. If you're using it, it means you're on AWS. You cannot move your data, or you cannot move your what's it called, your DynamoDB to Azure or to GCP. It's you have to host with AWS, right? But the benefit is that if you're building like serverless functions, for example, you can set up triggers, right? You can say when I save an item, from my DynamoDB configuration, if an item is saved here, I want you to, call this other thing. I want you to do that other thing, right? So you see it being used because of those kind of, additional benefits you get, right, from setting up workflows, right? I just uploaded a record to my database. Okay, DynamoDB, pick up this record and send it to, that machine learning service. Maybe like send it to a different Lambda, right, for processing. Probably because we want to, process every single data on the fly and use that for some sort of analytics or machine learning stuff elsewhere, right? So autonomy you get from working that way, right? From creating workflows like that. That gives it the benefits, right? And of course, it's you can also use it for a lot of serverless computation. We don't have to deploy like a server, right? It's just here as a table, which means if you are not using it, then of course you're not paying for it, right? So yeah, I think those are some of the benefits. Okay, so yeah, so we can add a new attribute. So we can decide to add a new attribute. We can call this maybe first name. I hope you understand me. So first name, right? And we can put in the first name. Let's say Mal. I'm just going to stick to these two. This is a string as well, right? So let's just create a new item. So we're just doing this from the dashboard, but of course, you saw from the code base I shared with you, you can do that programmatically as well. So now we have a new record, and as you can see, we have the record with just the first name, right? And you can proceed to scan, you can proceed to query, you can query with the ID, ID one, which is partition key. I can just run this, and you basically get your response, which is this. If you have more records, of course, you can query for specific records, and you have more items displayed here. So this is good, okay? And that is DynamoDB. And we are already 16 minutes. Okay, so we spent too much time. I wanted us to talk about Redshift, Aurora, and even talk about some best practices, security and compliance considerations, scalability, backup and recovery, cost optimization. I had a lot of things, in the material, but I did not want to, talk about the theory and leave the practical. Okay, so we will cover the rest in the workshops. Hopefully, yeah, I'll see you guys again some other time. And if you have more questions, take your questions to Discord, and I would respond there. Okay. So thank you very much, Amaka and Emanuela. I guess I will stop here for now. Right. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Mav. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Amaka.
All right, thank you so much for this session. See you another day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
All right, have a nice day ahead. Bye.